some practice sentences, going slowly and showing the process, as well as some tips on identifying stuff. Hopefully, prior to the midterm, I'll have a video which covers in depth the midterm practice paragraph and its translation. Alright, let's look at our sentences. We'll start with ille mens celeris est. First, I always look at the verb. This sentence ends in a form of sum, so it's either going to be linking or the dative of possession. Est here could mean there is at the start of the sentence, but it could also mean that some subject is something. So let's look at the other stuff. Ille is dative singular and nominative plural masculine, but mens is feminine, so it can't be that mind. With a dative starting like this, it'll probably be dative of possession. But let's look further. We see mens and celeris. Well, celeris is an adjective meaning swift, and it's feminine nominative singular. That agrees right with mens, so it's probably describing mens. So, taking into account our dative at the start, and this nominative, the phrase quick mind, we're probably going to have a dative of possession. We'll translate this as he/she has a quick mind. The dative of possession can trip us up, but the second sentence should be easier. The first thing I see in the second sentence is that we have a sed in the middle here. I'm always looking for coordinating conjunctions, sed, et, tamen, enim, and so forth, to see if we have two essentially different sentences. Now I look to the left of sed, and I see a nominative, bellum. Then I look to the right of sed, and I see erat. Since erat is meant to apply to both sentences, in virtue of the fact that both sides of the sed just have nouns with adjectives, we can see that there are two sentences here, connected by that sed. Let's separate them and deal with each one individually, as if they both have erat. We'll look to the left of the sed first. Bellum is nominative and accusative, but because we know the verb for the sentence is erat, and because erat doesn't go with an accusative, we can assume it's nominative. So, since we know erat is translated as was, we get a basic description. The war was short. Now, let's look to the right of that sed. Populo isn't nominative, but difficile is. In this case, though, since we know that erat is being shared by both sides of the sentence, we can infer the subject of the first half, the war. So, our translation becomes, the war was short, but it was ... Difficile is nominative, so it's the predicate adjective, that's the thing that describes the subject in the linking sentence. Populo could be dative or ablative, but the only uses for the ablative on its own that we know of are about means or instrument or time. Populo is neither, so it must be dative. We can translate this as for the people, and call it the dative of reference with adjectives. It answers the question, who is the war difficult for? Well, it's difficult for the people. So, our final translation is, the war was short, but it was difficult for the people. Pretty simple. Our third sentence looks a little ugly, and it will require us to know some memorized constructions. Anyway, let's first take a look at the sentence in general. There doesn't seem to be any coordinating or subordinating conjunctions, so we aren't going to chop up this sentence like we did to the last one. I do see propter, which tells me that we have a clause that functions as a prepositional phrase that starts with because. We expect an accusative after the word propter, perhaps with some other describing words. Propter artem sounds good. That means because of the art. But if we read further, we see poetae, the genitive singular of poeta, namely, of the poet. So we could say this might be because of the art of the poet. Poetae might also be the nominative plural or dative singular, so we can't be sure, but that seems right. Anyway, let's get back to the verb. We see agunt, and so we know that the subject will be third person plural. But more importantly, when we look around the sentence, we see gratias, which actually has a construction with agere. Awesome. So we can say that this probably means that some plural subject gives thanks to something or someone. But who? If we recall the notes in chapter 10, we will remember that gratias agere takes a dative as its special object. And we have just that when we look at dis. So we can say that this probably means they give thanks to the gods. Awesome. They give thanks to the gods because of the art of the poet. Sounds like a very good translation. But let's not forget that omnes. Omnes could be nominative or accusative, but it's obviously not going to be not accusative, since we've already got the object of our verb, dis. So it's nominative, and therefore the subject. And thus we have, everyone gives thanks to the gods for the art of the poet. Beautiful. Next sentence. This sentence doesn't have any subordinating or coordinating conjunctions, like postquam, et, sed, quod, quia, or anything like that. So we won't be able to split it up. No prepositions either, so it looks like this is one big continuous sentence. Let's check the verb. Placebant. Two things immediately come to mind. One, we're looking for a plural third-person subject, since it ends in nt. Two, we know that placere needs a dative for its object, since it's a special intransitive verb. Let's look back to the start of the sentence, since we'll usually find the subject there. Carmena looks nominative or accusative, since it's third declension neuter. It comes at the beginning, though, so it's probably nominative and is the subject. Now, when we look at the rest of the sentence, we see brevia, ilius, and poetae. Well, brevia agrees with Carmena in number, gender, and case, so that probably means together short songs. Coming to ilius and poetae, those agree as well. Putting them together, they mean of that poet. Well, that makes sense. The short songs of that poet. Poets make songs, after all. Now, we're left with vobis. But as we said, we still need our special object for placere. Vobis will fit right in. They were pleasing to y'all. Awesome, we got everything. The short songs of that poet were pleasing to y'all. Now, let's keep going. In this next sentence, I don't see any conjunctions or prepositions. That tempore looks like it might be an ablative on its own, but we'll worry about that later. To the verb, we see pugnabant. Great, so we're looking for a third-person plural subject. Does that appear at the start of the sentence? Milites. Great, so we're probably looking at the soldiers were fighting. What else? This saipe just means always, no declining or anything there. So we can translate the soldiers were always fighting. ... Now we see hoc tempore pedibus. Well, hoc could be singular nominative, but we already have a plural subject, so that can't be it. Hoc could also be accusative, but it doesn't make much sense to say that the soldiers were fighting this when we don't really know what this is. So hoc is probably ablative in agreement with tempore. This is the ablative of time when. The soldiers were fighting at this time. But what do we do with pedibus? It's also ablative, right? Maybe it's this time of feet or something? No, that doesn't make sense. Ablative uses include the ablative of means or instrument, though. The soldiers were always fighting with their feet, or more accurately, on foot. That works. Ooh. Next sentence. This one looks pretty easy. No conjugations or prepositions, so let's look at the verb. Incipient is the fourth conjugation verb with I, E, and T ending. That means it's the future tense with a third person plural subject. Looking at the start of the sentence, I see pueri. That's nominative plural, so it'll probably be the subject. The boys will begin, ... Now I see brevi tempore, which is a common Latin phrase worthy of memorizing as in a short time. It's the ablative of time in which, and you'll see it often, well, quite often, in your first translations especially. Our last word is laborare, to work. Well, that seems easy enough. Let's put it all together. The boys will begin to work in a short time. Sounds great. On to number 7. We're almost there. I see two prepositions here, in and per. Well, immediately, I'm going to section off in agris, since in takes an ablative, and in the fields is a common phrase. Looking at per, it takes an accusative. So I'll probably section off per totem aetatem. Totem agrees with aetatem in gender, number, and case. So it probably means through the whole life, or something like that. It might also mean because of the whole life, but when I see a form of laborare, I know it's probably talking about working, and so through intuitively makes more sense to me. Now, let's look at the verb. Laborabat tells me that the subject is singular and third person. And our last word in the sentence, hic, is nominative. On its own, that means this man, since it's masculine. So, we have our full translation. This man was working in the fields through his whole life. Last sentence. Ooh, I see a comma there. Let's investigate that. The word that comes after the comma is tum. Tum means then, so we can probably split this sentence into two parts. One thing happens, then another thing happens. Okay, so let's separate this and look at the first part. Decem horas manebimos. Decem and horas are both accusative plural, and they're both time phrases. So this looks like an accusative of length of time. Something happens for 10 hours. Manebimos is easy enough. That means we will stay. So our first bit is done. We will stay for 10 hours. Then, ... The second bit is pretty easy too. In urbem is a prepositional phrase meaning into the city, since urbem is accusative. And ambilabimos means we will walk. Alright, awesome. So the whole thing is, we will stay for 10 hours, then we will walk into the city. All done. I hope this helped you go through the translation process a bit. To recap, I would recommend skimming the sentence first. Look for ways to split the sentence into parts, whether with conjunctions or commas or prepositions. Then find the verb and the subject, and the rest should fall into place pretty quickly. Happy translating!